moons in January and March. Why am I talking to you about the full moons? Because they're kind of strange. There are 2 full moons in January, no full moons in February, and then 2 full moons in March. It's just a coincidence. It doesn't mean anything scientifically. But why is that? Is because the time between 2 full moons is 29.5 days. So just a bit more than the 28 days of the month of February, which means, sometimes it happens that February won't have any full moons. But then in that case, when February has no full moons, that means there's one just before February and one right after. And that means that the months of March and January both have 2 full moons. So just a shift between the calendar, the lunar calendar and our everyday calendar. But I thought it was interesting to mention. And the full moon of January 31st is very interesting. There's a full moon. It's also a supermoon. And I, put that in quotes because I personally don't like the term supermoon, because you expect the moon to be super big in the sky and everybody goes outside and says, hey, the moon, it was so big. But you would say that when the moon is not a supermoon, and people would still find it big because the difference actually almost impossible to notice for most people. In a sense that you would have to compare in your mind how big the moon was like almost 30 days ago, the last full moon, and it's impossible to remember that when you have, nothing to compare with. You can see the difference when you take 2 pictures and you compare. There's a few of those online when you compare like a small moon and a super moon. But it is a bit bigger in the sense that the moon is slightly closer to Earth. Again, because the orbit is an ellipse, it's not a perfect circle. So sometimes the moon is a bit closer to Earth and it appears slightly larger in the sky. I don't know exactly at that time. I think it can go up to 14% larger. It's not like 3 or 5 times bigger, just 14%. So like 10% bigger. And it can get up to 30% brighter. And that, can make it a bit a difference a little bit. But mostly any full moon in winter anyway will appear extremely bright if you have snow on the ground too, because everything is reflected and you just see everything around if you're away from city lights. At my place, for example, I live in a rural area and it's extremely bright in winter during full moons. But anyway, the media love the term supermoon. You'll hear about it. But I just want to say that it's like, honestly, most scientists or most astronomers I talk to are kind of tired a bit of that term because there's just a hype about it. But it's actually, as long as people want to see the moon, it's fine. That, it invites people to look up. But it doesn't look that much bigger in the sky. And in fact, if you think the moon looks very big in the sky next time you see it, try this trick. Put your arm in front of you, elongated. It's kind of hard to show through my webcam, but the nails of your small finger there will cover the moon. So at arm's length, the top of your fingers, basically any fingernails, will cover the moon. So when people say the moon is that big in the sky, well, no, it's not. It's actually pretty tiny. You look kind of weird on the side of the road doing that, pointing in the moon, but test it. It works. It's pretty amazing when people notice that for the first time. Okay, so January 31st, it's also a blue moon. And a blue moon, again, is just an expression. It's not blue. It's just the second full moon of the month. Just an expression. But what is interesting scientifically is that it will be, there's a lunar eclipse, so it's a red moon. And this is true when there's a lunar eclipse, the moon enters the Earth's shadow, it becomes darker. And when it's total, when the moon is completely in the Earth's shadow, it appears with a reddish color. It's not super bright red, but it does have a reddish color to it. But, this is, so the whole thing here, all those expressions, is it important scientifically? No. The only thing that, in a sense, is very interesting is the lunar eclipse, invites, kind of invite everyone to look up at the moon and see the eclipse. But the fact that it's a super moon, blue moon turning red moon, the media love that. And I've already seen a few articles, so I wanted to make sure that you knew where all those expressions came from. And it's just a nice coincidence, it's a full moon, and it's a lunar, it's a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses always happen at full moon anyway, and it's a blue moon, super moon. Anyway, you'll see the link and you see that. The one that's interesting for most of Canada is the first one. And here's the map for it. Time and date, they actually have very good eclipse maps. So you just click on it and you see what happens. So for example, for Montreal, we can see part of it. So partial eclipse, when you start seeing part of the moon hidden in the shadow, is at 6:48 a.m., but the moon will set just a few minutes later. So for about 20 minutes, no, half an hour, we'll have an eclipse moon on the western horizon, but it will be very low in the sky. If you are further west, for example, in Vancouver, then you get to see the whole thing, the whole eclipse, but you'll have to get up in the middle of the night to go stand outside for a few hours. Hopefully, it won't be so cold, but you have the local times here. Partial begins, so when penumbral is not as interesting to watch for most people. It's really when you get into the shadow that's partial eclipse begins at 3:48 a.m. So anyway, you can click on that link and click on the map where you are, and you can get the local information. See if it's worth for you to get up in the middle of the night to watch it. The last total lunar eclipse we had was in the evening, so early evening. That was it's much easier in those at that time to watch it. In this case, it's pretty early, either in the morning or late at night, very late at night.